Hi there, listeners. This is Cass here with the content warning for this episode. As you have probably gleaned from the title of the episode, we are talking about teratophilia today, but I want to come forward with more content warnings. There's a little bit of an advisory note in the episode about this as well, but it's very pertinent as we were talking about things which are inherently sexual and tread into the territory of kink that we be upfront about all of that. So you are prepared for this episode. There is discussion of, and some of our topics include, but are not limited to, teratophilia, or the sexual attraction to monsters, paraphilias, kink, sex, terminal illness, abuse, spousal murder and abuse, psychosis, sexual assault and rape fantasies, ableism, oviposition, and egg carrying, and murder. If this is not the episode for you, that's totally okay. Please take care of yourself, and we'll catch you with another one. Otherwise, let's get into the episode.
I went to my gynecologist today, and she looked at me and she's like, "You're not promiscuous. I don't have to do a pap smear."
Oh my god!
Like, called up my own gynecologist.
Hello, and welcome to Author's Note.
Don't listen.
My name is Cass.
And my name is Tees.
You were just making a face there. What are you about to do?
I have something to admit.
Oh no.
Listened to our Babygate episode last week. Usually I don't listen to our episodes once they're published unless it's to hear the cold open. My God, I'm so sorry. How do you guys deal with me and my vocal inflection journey that I take in every sentence?
I love it. Thanks. I adore it. It's what makes you you.
Thanks, Tees Nation.
I think maybe you need to listen to the Nika episode and gain some appreciation for your own voice.
I know, I do love the Nika episode very much so. Tees is just, I'm a journey I've discovered. I'm a roller coaster of a voice.
Well, you don't get used to it the way I have, I guess, because you don't edit. So I sit here every week and I'm like, Tees journey. Okay, there we go. Right, let's go.
Enough. God. But I was like, oh Jesus, I really just talk like this all the time. And I realized this is how I talk in real life too. And maybe my professional podcast voice should be different than my Tees voice, but too late now. But how long have I been podcasting? 4-5 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing matters.
It's a casual conversational podcast. I wouldn't want you to bring any other voice but your own to it.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. My name is Tees. That sounds terrible. I hate that. Never mind. Have you? Yeah.
Listen, we both know what we've been doing this week, and it's been Animal Crossing.
It has been Animal Crossing, and I also read the first volume of Burn the
Dune?
Witch. No, not Dune. I still have to finish Dune.
Do you think you'll ever finish Dune?
Yes, because I'm finishing Nightmare Alley now, and then after Nightmare Alley, I'll finish Dune.
You think so?
Maybe.
I don't doubt your ability to finish Dune. I want to make that very clear.
Thank you.
But I wonder if at some point it doesn't become its own sort of journey and its own sort of accomplishment to not finish Dune.
No, I will finish Dune because I have Dune brainworms and I live in a house with another Dune guy.
Worms, you say?
Worm. I
Dune
was
worm.
given the opportunity to design the t-shirts at work, and we specialize in spice blends.
Oh no.
Do you know how badly I want to make our shirt say, "Let the spice flow"? Do you know how badly?
Just hide like a really tiny vector of Timothy Chalamet somewhere in there.
That'd be really funny, but you also forget that I have no graphic design experience or abilities.
I can help you. Send it to me. I'll do it. And then I'll let you take credit for my work.
Thanks. The only time you ever will.
Oh, God. I will let you plagiarize me this once.
Thank you.
We're not turning into bad art friend. Oh, my God. What a mess that is.
Never. I would never do that to any of my friends. Literally, even if I commission an icon, I'm just like, credit in my description. Like,
it's important to give credit where credit is due.
I do. I'm a firm believer in it. But besides that, like I was saying, I read the first volume of Burn the Witch because I had to review it for Fandom Spotlight. So keep your eyes peeled for that. If you are a Bleach fan, I have opinions. But
is it by
besides
Tite Kubo?
Yes, it is. It sure is. And it's technically like set in the Bleach universe. But I never read or watched Bleach. So
Bleach has some really beautiful visuals, and Tite Kubo has like an impeccable eye for fashion.
I have to say the character designs are really cute in it.
Yeah.
I think it kind of, I mean, not to spoil my whole piece, but I thought it was kind of a little bit slow going. But also it's like, this man's last manga was 15 years long. So
let him rest.
God forbid he doesn't get like the beginning of a plot out within 4 chapters. So I was like, it's fine, whatever. But yeah. What about you, Cass? Besides Animal Crossing, anything else?
No, I want a public apology from every single one of my friends because Cornimer is real and he's fucking back, baby.
Cornimer is real.
They brought him back.
He's here. I'm so glad.
I did that.
You did it.
I did that.
You did that. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, Cass stays winning. You know how it is. Cass stays winning because this week's episode I'm so excited for. I think I feel about this episode the way you felt about getting to talk about Megalovania.
That's fair. I kind of love that. Wow. 2 sides of the spectrum.
T's feel about music the way Cass feel about sex. Truly, the Venn diagram of our friendship is music on one side for you, sex on my side, and then penis music in the middle. Tisa, I would like to welcome you to my godless kingdom of monster fucking.
Love that for
Unless you view God as a monster, in which case he's here too and you can fuck him if you want.
Thank you. Yes.
But all jokes aside, this episode is going to be discussing sexuality and kink, and especially aspects of kink which are considered more taboo, especially in today's internet climate. So please mind the content warning that comes before the beginning of this episode. But this is also your very welcome invitation to leave this episode if any of this makes you uncomfortable or upsets you. And I would also, right off the bat, like to put a blanket statement across this episode and say that just because something makes you uncomfortable does not mean it is morally or ethically wrong necessarily. I think that is something really important we all need to take in stride and try to hold with us and not be so reactionary. So I would ask, maybe if you're unfamiliar with, the title of the episode's implications, to come to this with an open and empathetic mind. Because I understand, while this is, like, fun and normal for me to talk about with my friends, it is not for most people.
Mm-hmm.
So,
fair.
We're going to be talking about teratophilia today.
Okay.
But I want to start by talking about Pyramid Head.
Mm-hmm.
Tease?
Yeah.
What do you know about Pyramid Head?
Daddy Big Dick.
You think so?
I know so. I know so. As a Silent Hill fan, I know so. Pyramid Head is a fun little guy. I mean, I feel like over the years, he's kind of been, God forbid me using this term, but he's kind of been whoopified a little bit. It's kind of a meow meowification of Pyramid Head. I mean, I know.
Meow meowification of Pyramid Head. I have soldered iron cat ears onto his pyramid.
I mean, part of the issue of Pyramid Head was he was terrifying because he would absolutely destroy you in Silent Hill. I mean, if you got him, them, multiple singles, I don't even know anymore at this point. When you got near Pyramid Head, so there was a very real possible chance that you would be attacked. And similar to how all Silent Hill games work, just the same way with the nurses and all the other funky little fetuses in that game, you gotta dodge them or else you die. And the appeal of Pyramid Head was rape involved? I can't remember. Or was that more?
I'll get into that.
An early 2000s meme. So it's been a minute since I've kind of consumed any Silent Hill content, especially even though I do own a few of the games. I've never physically played them, but I've watched several playthroughs. But anyway, Pyramid Head kind of was a stinky, nakey, dirty man in a hospital with a giant metal triangle on his head. A lot of people would cosplay them back in the day in the early 2000s. And they always, some people were on stilts, which always horrified me. And, but in game, something to be avoided, kind of wore a loincloth, if I recall correctly. Nope. And then as time went on, ass and titties got out more and more, and kind of became like this half monster, half human kind of anthro sex symbol for the horror community, the same way that Ghostface is. They kind of go hand in hand, I'd say. Yeah. So yeah, the meow meowification of Pyramid Head. That's what I know.
We're gonna be talking about that today.
Nice.
And we're gonna use Pyramid Head a bit as our sort of case study for Teratophilia and helping to contextualize it.
Nice.
So Pyramid Head is the colloquial name for what was once only known as the Red Pyramid Thing, and that's technically his name. He has become an iconic horror character since his reveal in 2001 Silent Hill 2. Yes. Pyramid Head is made and contextualized by the world end canon of Silent Hill, so we're gonna start by talking a bit about Silent Hill. Silent Hill, if you are not familiar with video games, because it's kind of like the pinnacle of horror, is a psychological horror series that was developed and published by Konami. The first Silent Hill game was released in 1999 on the PlayStation. The visuals play part and parcel to Pyramid Head, so I'm going to deep dive just a little bit into what makes Silent Hill visually so distinct, or what made it so distinct at the time.
What a banger of a series.
Truly is. Part of the appeal and lasting quality of old horror games in particular is their graphical fidelity. Because the consoles and computers that were running those games were far less advanced, the visuals were significantly reduced and rudimentary as compared to today's. So characters were made up of fewer polygons with lower resolution textures. I understand that means jack shit to some people, so I'm going to break this down a little bit.
That's why there's the fog, too. Do you know about that?
I'll get into it. Yeah, don't worry, I got you covered.
Thanks, King.
If you are unfamiliar with what polygons mean or low-res textures, try to think of any 3D model you see in a video game as being a folded and cut paper sculpture, like the ones you could print out and give to kids, where they cut it all out and then they assemble it with tape, right? Every polygon is a flat plane of that paper. And where today's models are so intricately made that they have thousands of those planes upon them, like you see you can see the musculature bend in a figure. We didn't have that with older games. There were fewer planes to work with, and so there's less paper overall. So they're way less detailed. Sometimes in older games, they might only have one flat plane as the entire face of a human figure. Lower resolution in textures just means that they could fit less detailed, less defined images over those planes. That's why you end up with things like super stretched out pixels. Especially when you look at the early Metal Gear Solid games, they played into the art style where none of the eyes are definitively shown.
You
just have these
Silent Hill games?
No, early Metal Gear Solid
I was games. Yeah, that is true, but...
Because if you look at the concept art that was done for Metal Gear Solid, all the characters' eyes are blacked out, which worked really well in the advantage of this, low-fidelity graphics scene. So, all of this to say that your imagination has to fill in a lot of the gaps, and with horror in particular, that works to the advantage of the developer. Silent Hill, as he's kind of alluded to, has also been associated with its very deep, impenetrable atmospheric fog that lies over the entire landscape of the series and has persisted to this day. That fog happens to be a workaround for technical limitations. Computers weren't able to handle too many models being on screen at once, much less the dozens of buildings that might reach off into a distance if you're trying to communicate the scope of a whole town. So the low draw distance meant that Silent Hill was most immersive and convincing when the players could see very little beyond their immediate surroundings, and that's rendered textually believable by fog and murky darkness. That's why a lot of these old games have really atmospheric fog. There was a Saddle Club game that I played on the computer as a kid, and it had the creepiest it was these moorlands, essentially, just like blanketed with fog all the time. And it's like really eerie and the colors are super desaturated, but it's a technical limitation.
Sims 2 also. Same thing.
Yeah. It's important, too, I think, to understand that Silent Hill, when it was released, its graphics were considered something of an absolutely staggering success, especially if you look at the cutscenes in Silent Hill 2. There's some stuff in there that still holds up today because they used a blend of full motion video, which is like actual live action footage, blended with early mocap technology. It's cool. It's a really beautiful, horrifying thing to look at. Silent Hill as a franchise, because it's a psychological horror, does center itself around repressed memory, denial, and secrecy, both internal and external to the player character. This is your warning that this series deals with really difficult and often incredibly complicated themes, and we're going to be talking about spoilers for Silent Hill in this, because we can't talk about spoilers, or we can't really talk about Pyramid Head without talking about spoilers because of what and who he is. So, in Silent Hill, characters are often thrown between two worlds, one that seems very pleasant, if not an oddly quiet town, and one that drips with rust and barbed wire, where the snow in the atmosphere turns to falling ash, and there are monsters lurking in buildings that are crumbling and decrepit when moments before they were totally normal buildings. Before things went down the toilet for Konami, and they started milking Silent Hill like a cash cow, the monsters and happenings of Silent Hill were direct, uncomfortable reflections of our main characters' lives. In Silent Hill 2, the main character, James Sunderland, travels to Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his wife, Mary, and he attempts to go there and find her. The reality is that James murdered Mary after she became belligerent and abusive in the late stages of terminal illness. James smothers her, and he enters into a deep state of denial and arguably psychosis when he enters Silent Hill. Pyramid Head as a character is a reflection of James' own psyche. Physically, James is a normal-looking dude. He's pretty unremarkably handsome. He's thin. He's a white dude with, like, blondish brown hair that's got that, like, classic e-boy now 90s middle part. I think Cass calls them Garfield ears.
Don Bluth looking ass.
Truly, he looks like a Don Bluth boy. But, like,
and then Mary is in her Christina Aguilera at the VMAs outfit, which I think is so funny. I love it.
Fuck yeah, Christina. Pyramid Head is similarly pretty thin, though he has the muscle definition that dehydration and dragging bodies and a blade bigger than your own body will give you. He is acutely masculine, and he wears a massive pyramid structure over his head. It is made from rusted metal, and there's an iron plate at the front that actually sort of peels up to allow these tongue-like appendages to slip out, and he uses those both to attack James and to attack other monsters. The idea that metal actually folds up is another sign of James' psychosis, because the idea that metal is able to bend and curl like that freely was an idea that the developers had to further prove the irreality of his existence, which is a cool little touch.
That is a really cool touch.
Mm-hmm. There is some debate as to what is under the helmet. Some figures of the character depict the underside of his helm being filled with this sort of bulging, bulbous flesh, and many artists, they just choose to heavily shadow it so they don't even have to handle it. There's this, like, really large, fleshy bulge at the back underside of Pyramid's helmet up against, like, the top of his back. In the first figure that was released of him, but the art director said that he just did that because he needed something to close the gap. Masahiro Ito, who is the monster designer for the initial 3 Silent Hill games, says that he never explicitly says what he looks like, and he won't ever. He says that he knows what is under Pyramid Head's helmet, essentially. Initially, he sort of had this idea that it was going to be a bound human face being sort of pulled in a bunch of different directions, but he doesn't ever want to disclose what he feels like it would look like now that he has more definitively ironed that out. Mini spoiler for the rest of this episode, but Masahiro Ito clearly resents what Konami did to both Pyramid Head and Silent Hill as a whole, and he has previously stated, when he was asked to work on another Silent Hill game, that it would only be if Pyramid Head wasn't present or if he could kill him off in the very first scene.
Nice! Kill your
So,
darlings.
from the butcher's apron to his leather boots and white gloves, Pyramid Head is made to be evocative of an executioner. He is the manifestation both of James's rage and his desire for masochistic punishment and accountability for his actions. Textually, Silent Hill was apparently a town of executioners, with everyone either being an executioner or being related to one. And I don't totally know how that works out, but it's what has built the mythos of Pyramid Head. That was their intention when they were creating him. So he is in the first game, and we'll go over all the aesthetics as compared to each other a little bit later, but he is in the first game sort of fully clothed. He's wearing a full-bodied butcher's apron, and he's wearing high leather boots and white gloves. Pyramid Head appears to James first as this standing apparition on the other side of iron bars in a derelict building in Silent Hill, but minutes later we actually see him attacking two monsters. Those monsters are called mannequins, and they are decidedly feminine monsters. If you imagine a woman's body being chopped in half at the waist, and you mirror her legs up and you attach them so it's two sets of hips and legs on top of one another, that's what mannequins look like. And while most sources describe the scene as Pyramid Head just attacking, this scene, you can go and look it up if you want to, is really sexualized in the angle of attack. Pyramid Head has his hips pressed forward into the lower ass of one of the mannequins as he forces it almost to scissor a second one, holding it by its upper legs and jerking it around as the one pinned to the counter beneath Pyramid Head and the other mannequin convulses and flinches. James, while this is happening, moves into a closet to hide rather than confronting Pyramid Head, and we see one of the mannequins tossed to the side as Pyramid Head tries to rip the other one apart by its upper legs before the scene cuts back to James in the closet. And then when we go back to Pyramid Head again, he is dragging the mannequin across the floor by one of its ankles. The eroticism of Pyramid Head attacking those mannequins was deliberate, and I think I think some people are just uncomfortable with admitting that in the scenario of a horror setting. But Takayashi Sato, who was the character designer and CGI director for Silent Hill and Silent Hill 2, said,
"Psychological horror has to shake humans' hearts deeply. Shaking people's hearts deeply means uncover people's core emotions and their core motivation for life. Everybody is thinking and concerning about sex and death. Everything. If we want to scare, shake, or touch the users or spectators, then we have to think about sex and death deeply. To make like a death scene, somebody died or monsters died, we tried to make erotic essence. This is kind of a visual and a core concept."
Yeah. What do you think about that, Tease? How do you feel about that?
It makes sense. Unfortunately, and sex and violence is so heavily interwoven within horror culture and video game culture and pop culture and all of this stuff that it makes sense that in order to truly make a bad guy, so to say, is to show something like this. I mean, there's very clearly other ways how you could show somebody's terrible without it being a sex scene. However, that is kind of a lot of people's immediate response of how to demonstrate how a character can be quote unquote evil or a bad person or whatever. And it makes sense. I get where it's coming from, and I also feel like it is unfortunately a very male view to do that as well. But I mean, I get the point, and let's be real, Silent Hill's a very testosterone filled game.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily agree 100%, but I get where the team is coming from when they decided to include this.
Yeah. So while Pyramid Head is both a literal and figurative monster, he exists also in a capacity to help James reach a point of clarity and self-reflection. And this is something I'm going to come back to a little bit later in this. So, though Pyramid Head really only works as a fully realized character and creature of horror as he relates to James Sunderland, this hasn't stopped Konami from reusing him and from putting him into every adaptation and spin-off that they possibly can. So, we're going to go over a little bit about how the visuals of Pyramid Head have changed, because they have pretty considerably. In the 2006 live-action Silent Hill movie, Pyramid Head wears only a leather skirt that sits really tight around his hips and then drags about his legs. He's more muscular, and his body is covered in mottled skin, scars, and black veins. There are chunks of his flesh that are missing altogether. From here on to Pyramid Head's Pyramid Head doesn't have a flat plane at its front, but comes into a more severe point in a traditional pyramid shape. Ah, yes, the scalene pyramid. In this film, there is a moment where he carries a struggling woman by her neck to where the protagonist Rose can see, and with one hand he tears all the woman's clothes off, and then he grabs into the flesh at her chest right between her breasts, and he tears all her skin off. He doesn't appear in the rest of the movie after that.
It's just
that's
a
like
cameo.
his final scene.
Oh God, one and done. That's all. He just. Yeah.
He's just there to terrorize women, and then he's gone.
King. We.
Tease. In 2008's Silent Hill Homecoming, Pyramid Head is wearing the movie-styled leather skirt again. He is shirtless again, and we see more muscle mass on him than we did in the introduction in Silent Hill 2.
Mm-hmm. I actually own Silent Hill Homecoming, but I only...
Don't play it.
I only got as far as, like, the water monster in the basement. So literally the first mini boss, me and my pal played it together, and we're like,
the only Silent Hills that exist to me are 1, 2, 3, and PT.
Fair. 4 is kind of fucked up and fun. I own 2 and 3, and I own Homecoming.
So in Homecoming, he's known as the Boogeyman and is again a figure of punishment, but he doesn't have that same edge of sexuality that was integral to James's own story.
Boo.
Which, like, exactly, weak sauce. There's a lot of themes of James's own repressed sexual frustrations that we'll come back to. Maybe Pyramid Head is just James really wanting to bone down with a male nurse. In 2012, we got a sequel movie called Silent Hill Revelation. Kit Harington is in it. Sean Bean it's a mess.
It's
Pyramid
a mess.
Head is significantly beefier. He is still wearing his leather skirt, but it is now, it has this, like, very apparent cut up the back of it that I'm pretty sure lets you see his entire ass if he weren't always in the darkest environments or forward-facing like an assless coward. I just want to see his cheeks.
Maybe he's really into voyeurism.
Let me peep the cheeks on this man.
Maybe he's flagging. We just don't know.
He's also not covered in as much grime and dirt and blood as he has been previously.
Why do his muscles look like that?
Making him appear almost gloved to the shoulder in filth. Like, he's chunky. And the same guy is playing him as he was in the 2006 Silent Hill.
Really?
So, like, what's going on there?
Sir, I'm more concerned that he looks like he's wearing, like, a pillow for abs. You know,
I mean, he kind of is. His body is like it's very.
It looks very suited. Like, it looks very ugly. Not ugly, but like something is there. Mm-hmm. It's not Uncanny Valley. It's just bad.
In 2020, Pyramid Head gets added to the asymmetrical horror game Dead by Daylight, and in Dead by Daylight, one player occupies the role of a killer, and all other players occupy the role of survivors attempting to escape. I don't really go here. Please do not come for me. But Dead by Daylight does have a roster that is, like, full of horror icons, from Freddy Krueger to Ghostface. They've got Pinhead now. It's, like, cool, it's fun, exciting. They got all them big, juicy properties. And I know a lot of you have probably seen the post about Pyramid Head that Christopher put up on Twitter. I don't remember his @ off the top of my head, but it's like the bimbofication of Pyramid Head, and it shows screenshots from each one of these properties. And I know you have probably seen the Pyramid Head in Dead by Daylight in that image where he is shirtless and really thick, and his skirt has an absolutely fucking scandalous slit up the side that really means he's just kind of wearing, like, 2 mud flaps, one on the front and one in the back, and you can see his caked up ass and not so subtle bulge in the front. That is not what he actually looks like in Dead by Daylight. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, they were not that kind to us. That is a mod that somebody used and tricked the internet with, but, like, Give Pyramid Head the schmeat he deserves. He, in Dead by Daylight, is actually rocking his original flat-fronted helm, his full-bodied apron, the white gloves, the leather boots. He is, again, a little bit beefier than the original Pyramid Head, and he's got chunks of skin carved away from his body and blood across his arms and shoulders. But this is very much a return to form for Pyramid Head. And so while we can joke about his bimbofication, his meow meowfication, his kitty boy essence, Dead by Daylight did kind of tug him backward into some less whorish garb, and I say that 100% affectionately. Regardless of all of that, though, people have had sexual fantasies about Pyramid Head since Silent Hill 2, when he was, aesthetically speaking, his least sexually marketable. We cannot divorce Pyramid Head from the innate sexuality that is injected into his character in Silent Hill 2, because James' story is one, like I said, that is threaded with his own complicated relationships to his sexuality that gets reflected in Pyramid Head. Both the mannequins and bubblehead nurses are pulled from James's sexual frustration with his wife who's ill, and having Pyramid Head act so violently with the mannequins when Pyramid Head is a reflection of James's own feelings, memories, and desires is not a coincidence. There's a reason that a lot of people have walked away from Silent Hill 2 with the idea that James canonically had an affair with one of the nurses, because they feel the nurses are a full representation of that. And because Pyramid Head is in the context of the narrative and aid to James in terms of bringing him to a place of actualization and realization, players are able to very easily press a sort of veneer of sympathy and empathy over Pyramid Head as a monster. Optionally. Sometimes you just want to view him as a terrible monster, but some people do like this empathetic reading of him. And where Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 3 deal heavily with the occult, Silent Hill 2 sort of eschews that to focus in on the psychology of its characters, which means it's even more deeply interpersonal. Pyramid Head is hot. Like, I think we can admit that. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think he's also a really worthy case study of why it is that we experience attraction, be that romantic or sexual, to figures we present as monsters. So, when we discuss monsters in this episode, we're not talking about ethical or moral monsters by way of serial killers or war criminals. I'm sorry if you have fantasies about Joe Biden, like that's a whole different kind of thing. We're not talking about that here. We are talking about the very literal, non-human or human adjacent monster, as we recognize it in Hollywood standards. Also, for point of clarification, your cute anime girls with like cat ears or little horns don't qualify as monsters in this episode. Even if she is thousands of years old, you are missing the monstrous aspect here to qualify for.
But what if she has a tail?
Monster fucker? No, I'm gatekeeping. She doesn't count. I'm gatekeeping.
Vampires?
We'll get into that one.
Debatable.
We're going to talk about that one, okay?
This is very fun.
Tease, right off the top of your head, who are some fuckable monsters you can think of?
Abe Sapien from Hellboy.
Hell yes.
Love him. And then hand in hand is Charlie from Shape of Water.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say Mecha Godzilla, but that's a whole other can of worms.
I mean, it counts. Yeah,
it counts.
We can throw Godzilla in there. We can throw King Kong in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of Pokemon that people want to fuck, and I don't like that. Mr. Mime.
Listen, we need to acknowledge as a society that Mr. Mime knows Delia Ketchum biblically.
This is not the first time you've said that exact phrase on this podcast. Who else is a fun little monster? What do we got going on? I mean, let's be real. All the devils in Doro Hey Doro are fuckable.
I feel like I'm a bouncer at a club with some kind of litmus
You're
test
knocking
right
on my
now.
door. Miss Venom. How could I forget Venom?
How could you forget
How could I forget Queen Venom? The most important monster to modernly fuck. People are horny for Lovecraft horrors.
Cthulhu. I mean, we have minotaurs, sirens, mermaids, harpies,
werewolves.
Werewolves.
Neopets fuck. I've seen art. I've seen art of Neopets fucking. Hello, 911. The Pokemon are fucking.
They're out there. There's options. There's
tons.
A bevy of content.
There's so much. And guess what? If you don't think it's fuckable, Somebody does.
Somebody does.
Somebody does.
Somebody does.
Yeehaw.
The monster fucking kink that we are jokingly calling monster fucking is actually clinically called teratophilia, which is defined as having sexual attraction to monsters or to people with physical deformities. I cannot
Yikes on that second part.
Yeah. I cannot deconstruct the ableist language of the ever-evolving clinical field, but please know and understand that, like, we recognize its presence in that definition. We cannot unpack all of that luggage in today's episode. That's not what we're talking about, but I understand that, like, that is an aspect to this that, like, very much needs to evolve and change. Technically, teratophilia is classified as a paraphilia rather than a kink, but there is no widespread consensus on the line between kink and paraphilias. Paraphilia being arousal to atypical situations, entities, and such. So, technically, your monster fucking thing is like a paraphilia instead of a kink. But listen.
Whatever.
Listen, we all gotta have wiggle room. In very broad strokes, the prevailing belief is that teratophilia can often allow people to explore masculinity without having to engage in a fantasy that involves men. I'm going off the many papers I have read and my experience with this. I do not want to deny the existence of beautiful monster women. I'm gonna bring those up in a little bit. But a lot of this centers around masculinity, and we are two queer people talking about this, so please know that we're trying to approach it from an edge of empathy and understanding that gender is weird and wobbly and not binary. So werewolves, if we look at them, for example, are bestial, yes, but we ascribe to them ideas of territoriality, strength, a desire to protect. The creature from the Black Lagoon is all physique and was the direct inspiration for the Shape of Water's own leading monster man. And even when we look at the relatively new figure of Lady Dimitrescu from Resident Evil Village, we are presented with a woman who is abnormally tall and powerful, whose femininity plays with traditionally masculine ideas of attractiveness. There's no denying that.
Big hot.
Tease, I'm gonna have a lot of quotes for you to read here.
Yeah.
I did go on a bit of a deep dive for this because this is something that I find very interesting. So there is a paper by a researcher named Sarah Lisa Anzaldúa for, I believe it was the University of Taiwan, and the paper is called Teratophilia, an inquiry into monster erotica and the feminine psyche. She writes,
in a world of globalized media, where the worst faces of patriarchal oppression can be streamed 24 hours a day, monster erotica offers an alternative sexual object and serves as a means for individuals to avoid cognitive dissonance evoked by the dichotomy of the aggressive masculine and the relenting feminine common in the traditional romance. The shadow, i.e. the monster, acts as an intermediary between these two archetypes that can be at odds in a context where the masculine is viewed as a harbinger of suffering and oppression. By identifying with the protagonist who engages in sexual activity with the monster, readers cathartically engage with the masculine through the shadow in her subconscious.
how do you feel about that? What do you think?
Listen, when I'm choosing my words very deliberately here, because people listen to this podcast that know me in person. I mean, when I want to read not safe for work monster fucking, I want to read it. And I don't really think about the gender involved. I just go, ooh, monster hot, and I click on it. So, I mean, I guess maybe in the more traditional contextual sense, this works, like especially with Creature of the Black Lagoon or with King Kong or something like that. Besides not only those movies in particular that come to mind are unfortunately racist caricatures, which that's another thing that one day we're gonna have to talk about and unpack because oofa doofa. There is a semblance of possession and strength and protection involved, and I think for the original appeal of it before it kind of entered the more online and open queer community in particular, I feel like that is the case, but maybe not as so. Maybe yes for the mainstream still, but not as much for the circles of people who do in fact profit off of not safe for work art of monster fucking, so to say.
Mm-hmm. The smaller indie queer art community.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So she also then notes the historic shift we've seen in our regard to monsters, writing, contemporary media tends to depict copulation with monsters in a positive manner, which diverges from the historically dominant theme of sexually dangerous monsters whose carnal appetites imply immortality and evil. In current monster erotica, monsters are welcomed as sexual partners because they are a source of positive affect, transformation, and even companionship. Baby, don't worry. I have a whole paper from the 1970s that I can send to you that was written in like a film review journal about monsters and sexuality.
Oh, that kind of rules.
Yeah.
I know usually right now the rule of thumb is can they communicate with you? It's like 3 questions. Can they communicate with you? Can
you Are you talking about the Harkness test?
Is it the Harkness test? Oh,
yeah,
God,
it's called the
Doctor
Harkness
Who.
test.
Oh,
right?
Jesus, Doctor
With
Who
this
and
idea of
Torchwood.
like,
yeah.
you know, is it able to communicate with you? Is it able to consent? And there's like a third one.
Yeah.
And somebody was like, this is cool, except that means Scooby-Doo can like qualifies for this. And it's like, listen.
No, not Scooby.
Nothing is perfect. So an important aspect to this and like this huge boom that we have seen in like more mainstream media when it comes to monster erotica, monster fucking, what have you, is the anonymity that the internet can offer us. So much of the driving force between Teratophilia is erotic fiction that is published online under pseudonyms. And ABO can actually kind of tread the line and even pass easily into the territory of Teratophilia the more it plays with physical morphology and reproductive sciences. Like, there are people who just like go real at it when it comes to like ABO biology, and like it very quickly treads into like werewolf territory or just full-on bestial stuff. I don't say bestial in the sense of bestiality. It's a whole other thing. We're not talking about that today.
Mermaids too.
But in the sense of just like bestial attributes, a la, you know, like Howl in Howl's Moving Castle when he turns into a monster.
Yeah.
And then Miss Ansel Dua hits us with this other important note that I would love for you to read, Tease.
Teratophiliac romance allows women to experiment emotionally and sexually through fantasy in ways not possible with human pairings and offers exploration via the near limitless capacity of the imagination. For example, ovipositor narratives, stories in which a phallic monster, such as bugs or aliens, lays eggs inside a human, blur traditional gender boundaries by conflating the feminine, eggs, with the masculine, penis and ejaculate. In some stories, these monsters are indiscriminate in whom they impregnate, and men are just as easily chosen as hosts.
How do we feel about this?
I mean, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I think it makes sense. And
so
yeah.
I think that last note about gender boundaries is more pertinent to this podcast because
Definitely.
we're looking at things through a very queer lens.
Mm-hmm.
And like we discussed in our It episode, monsters have really long been used in Hollywood as a means of discussing the sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
The werewolf in particular has long been used as a symbol of queerness, be that sexual queerness or more gender-based queerness, right?
Not to mention that with the possibility of eggs in general, I'm just going to say, it offers an opportunity for trans bodies to be explored as well, especially if it's not just male or female, but it's more like the possibility of an orifice, so to say. I don't know. I'm not a biology guy, so I don't really know exactly what terms to use.
I mean, I'm
exactly.
looking at the entire Mass Effect fandom. If you didn't romance one of the humans, but I'm sorry, you might fall into this territory of teratophilia, right? Of like all the aliens that are involved in the Mass Effect series that you can romance. And so like there's tons of speculative fan fiction about, you know, how Turian mating rituals work and how their sexual organs operate.
Homestuck trolls.
Why did you bring that to the table?
Because do you know how much I read as a teenager about troll biology?
In a 1973 publication of the Journal of Popular Film, Walter Evans writes, Tease, could you read this for me?
The key to monster movies and the adolescents which understandably dote upon them is the theme of horrible and mysterious psychological and physical change. The most important of these is the monstrous transformation, which is directly associated with secondary sexual characteristics and with the onset of aggressive erotic behavior. The Wolfman, for example, sprouts a heavy coat of hair, can hardly be contained within his clothing, and when wholly a wolf is, of course, wholly naked. Comparatively, innocent and asexual females become, after contact with a vampire, his kiss, readily marked on their necks, or werewolf, as in Cry of the Werewolf, quite sexy, aggressive, seductive, literally female vamps and wolves. Okay.
That article is obviously a little bit dated.
Yeah.
But I did want to bring it up because people have been talking about the presence of the relationship between monsters and eroticism since the 70s. And even before then. Hi, can we take a look back at many, just canonical mythologies throughout our own history, in every single corner of the world where relationships between these sort of non-human and sometimes animal figures existed with relationships to humans. I think that's an important marker. This has always been an area of human curiosity.
Definitely.
And because a monster is non-human, we're able to play with the ideas of sexuality in a way that isn't limited by the more standard gender binary that gets imposed on a Euro-American Western world, it's okay, well, you unfortunately, I think I don't mean to equate transness to monstrousness, obviously, but I think there is some sort of small gateway there where you're able to look at a monster and say well, maybe he's quote unquote masculine in every other aspect, but what if he has a vulva? That sort of thing, where you're able to explore those ideas because you're not limited to the ideas that have been implanted in you of what is human and what is the human experience. If we look to Shape of Water, which is perhaps the most well-known piece of media that is overt in its monster fucker positivity, we can sit and ask ourselves what the appeal of the asset is, right? He is undeniably physically attractive, and the team behind the movie spent months working to perfect and exact his appearance so that while being visibly non-human, he would also be that perfect twist of attractive. He has a beautiful body, and we all know that Guillermo del Toro carried around a picture of his butt in his wallet to ask opinions, but he also has these wide, soft eyes and a mouth that is very gently upturned at its corners as if in a smile. His color palette is just really beautiful and enticing.
He love egg.
He love egg.
He love
egg.
He love egg, and he's gentle and he's understanding. Oh, Tease love.
But shout out to Candace Frederick, who in an article for GameSpot totally missed the boat and really wrote, it's one thing to ask audiences to suspend disbelief for this fairy tale, and it's a whole other thing to ask them to consider for one moment that an otherwise sane woman would be so desperate as to fall for a creature who can't even survive on dry land, not when there are actual men in this town. Candace, it's not about that.
No, I mean, literally.
You missed the point.
How obvious, though, especially with Shape of Water, especially because her neighbor, her downstairs neighbor, her next door neighbor, is a gay man. It's clear as day, Candace.
Here is a creature who is learning and also othered by the world, but still has a gentleness and sympathy to him that grows into a genuine love for the heroine of the film. And it is not a coincidence that queer individuals and women engage in fantasies that involve creatures that embody the masculine, but come to with an experience of being othered and ostracized or even preyed upon. And the romances between a man and a woman exist ad nauseum, but they require the presence of a man. And some people just don't want a man in their fantasies. Going back to Ansel Dua, she breaks down quite clearly why people may not want to engage in a fantasy that involves men.
In a Western context, women are becoming increasingly autonomous through financial independence and political representation. This freedom may create conflict with individual men and with a society that still adheres traditional gender norms that expect women to be dependent, subservient, and acquiescent to men. Furthermore, Women are inundated with news and images of male violence, regardless of the fact that the majority of men are law abiding and non-violent. Statistically, though men make up roughly half of the population, in the United States they make up 99% of rape arrests, 88% of murder arrests, and 87% of aggravated assault arrests, and 83% of arrests related to family violence. Kimmel, 265. In turn, between a quarter to half of all American women have been sexually assaulted, and between 12% to 25% have been raped. Kimmel again. Additionally, the U.S. has one of the highest rates of spousal abuse in the industrialized world, with 85% of the victims being women. It may therefore be difficult to feel attraction to men when their representation is increasingly problematic, especially for victims of violence. Even for non-victims, such as representation brings to mind the socio-political confrontations between men and women.
All of that said, there is the understandable caveat, right, that a lot of rapes committed by women go unreported. A lot of abuse by women goes unreported or unbelieved. There is that undeniable aspect.
Yeah.
That does not, however, erase the aggression that exists in our system by men towards women and towards queer people.
I don't know, this might be me going out on a limb, but also I feel like with the ability that you're writing this monster fantasy, even if you are brutally handled, you can still separate yourself because it's not legitimate. Like, it doesn't, even if it is a quote unquote rape fantasy or something like that, it can't truly happen in real life because it's a monster and it's not a human. So you could still detach yourself from it. And I think that speaks volumes to this culture as well, especially when there is such a fear of men. Like, I mean, I know tons of lesbians who read male, or so on and so forth, relationships and fiction because it's not about them. It's not about what could happen to them. I feel like you can remove yourself from it a little bit better, even if you don't really consider yourself attracted to men. And I think that's the same for monsters as well. Yeah.
That's a point we're going to circle back to, actually.
Nice. Yeah.
I mean, we've already gotten into it, but there's a very present overlap in teratophilia and rape fantasies that can't be ignored when we discuss this. So numbers do vary from study to study, but generally speaking, upwards of 60% of women have had a sexual rape fantasy, and researchers actually suspect that number is way higher because they believe that people are underreporting that. And I understand that we are talking largely from statistics taken about women here. I am working with the information that is available to me, and more studies are unfortunately done and focused on women in this and their sexual fantasies than those of men for reasons that baffle me.
Yeah.
So, in an examination of teratophilia through the lens of evolutionary biology, Scott A. McGreal writes, the phenomenon of rape fantasies is something of a scientific enigma. Women consider the reality of being actually raped or forced to have sex to be an abhorrent, traumatic experience. However, women who have fantasies of forced sex usually report them to be erotically exciting rather than frightening. A number of theories have been proposed to explain this, but researchers are in agreement that such fantasies emphatically do not mean that women have a desire to actually be raped in real life. A study on the content of such fantasies suggests that key elements include a scenario where an attractive, powerful figure, usually male but occasionally female, finds the woman so desirable, attractive, and seductive that he is overcome with passion and is unable to restrain himself and forces himself upon her. The woman in the fantasy resists, but quite often that is a token resistance only or even just as pretense, and she may change from initial refusal to willing participation as the fantasy progresses. I mean, hi, if you went and saw The Last Duel, Tease and I both did, there is this, like, very sort of clarifying moment for, is it Jacques Degree?
I think so. I think
where when he's engaging in a what essentially becomes a group sex session, he, like, chases this woman around the table in this, like, fun little game where she's very much pretending, it seems, to resist him, but when he catches her, he tosses her on the bed and she's giggling and laughing and she's having a great time. And then that scene replays again with our female lead and she's not into it, but his own ideas of, like, what it is to have this female fantasy of like being sexually possessed and raped like that. That's where his mind is drawing from.
Mm-hmm. I think also, not to go all the way back to 50 episodes ago, but with our Alpha, Beta, Omega episodes, and specifically the lawsuit, I mean, I was the clown who read both of those books, and those were a very big theme within both of the books in question, that you're desirable. You're so hot that you need to be fucked. God help you.
Or that omegas release a pheromone that makes it physically incapable for alphas to control themselves, right?
And on the other hand, physically impossible for the omega to control themselves either, because they're so filled with lust and horny. Like,
yeah, it's a fuck or die scenario that quickly becomes very violent in most scenarios.
Yeah.
Scott McGreal suggests that from an evolutionary perspective, these fantasies of forced sex might actually play into the idea of a mating ritual in which one partner must win the other first through a show of power and control, while also affirming the desirability of the partner that they are trying to be with. But I think for some individuals, making a human the aggressor of their rape fantasies may either prove too painful or perhaps even too bland. Monsters, like Teese was saying, again, offer a twist on the human physicality. They can blur the lines of gender and biology in a way human can't, in a way which humans can't, but they can also be dismissed from reality. They're not a real threat. They don't exist. They are there to be explored in fantasy and fiction. And part of the appeal of them, I think, really is the irreality of them. That, you know, I can have this fantasy involving this horrifying creature in, you know, which rape might play a part, but I don't have to worry about that in my day-to-day life. That's not a real threat that can harm me. Pyramid Head is introduced to us in a sexually aggressive moment, and he is indisputably an aggressive monster. But he also exists as a mechanic to force James to confront and therefore better himself. This monster is a representation of self-realization and recovered memory, and also the violent and aggressive process of that. That injection of sympathy into Pyramid Head's brutality means he can be molded into a more aggressive or more empathetic figure depending on a player's preference. You can have your Pyramid Head rape fantasy if you so desire, or you can have your soft, whoopified Pyramid Head cozy fantasy if you want that instead. Monster porn is a very real thing that we don't totally understand, but I think it's really important to say that it's normal, and having a positive, open discussion about sex and kink and paraphilia is important to demystifying a lot of this stuff and to promote healthier conversations between people overall. So, hi, that's kind of why I wanted to do this episode. I think Pyramid Head's really fascinating, and I think this whole genre of the internet is really fascinating, but I also think it's important to have discussions about these things so that people approach things with less ignorance and more empathy, and that you stop shaming and kink shaming and harassing people on your timeline because you think some terrible misguided thing about it.
Yeah. I love to say horny people go to jail, but I didn't say you couldn't be horny. You just gotta be horny in jail.
Well, it's about an appropriate space, right?
Yeah.
And appropriate circumstances,
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, do I give a shit? No. Have I read Monster Fucking? Yeah. I mean, hello?
Who hasn't?
Who hasn't? If you said you didn't, you're lying. I mean, let's be real. Especially, I feel like, younger millennials. My God. Twilight, Harry Potter, all the other
vampires fall into this category.
They sure
I'm
do.
sorry, they do.
They do.
If you're really hot for vampires, that's just like the shallow end of the monster fucking
and I mean,
pool.
even to some degree, witches. I've definitely read some pieces that's like, this witch did something to make me hornier, and you're like, okay, like
it's this presence of the supernatural, right?
Yeah,
of
definitely.
some otherworldly force that affects and changes. We all joke about, like tentacle porn and hentai, but like there's a reason it exists. Like, there's a reason that people want to explore these compulsions. It's not inherently linked to, you know, rape or rape recovery or anything like that. It's just it's a genuine curiosity and a fascination that some people have, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone is served by sitting there and being like, you dirty, nasty monster fuckers.
Stinky.
Pyramid Head, smash or pasties?
Depends in the context. Probably smash, though. Just to say I did it. And maybe to hold a sword. What about you?
It's got 2 of them in some of the adaptations.
Ayo.
Maybe he's compensating. Maybe Pyramid Head got pussy.
I'd be down. Cheers.
This has been Author's Note. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you stuck around for the entire thing, I know this is kind of a little bit out there, but this is the stuff that I really like to talk about. Yeah. If you say so, maybe we'll do more. This has been Author's Note. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, may I suggest sharing this with a friend or a loved one? This one in particular. Sit your mom down and say, Mom, I want to share something from my life with you. Maybe she's cool. I know my mom would listen to me talk about monster fucking ad nauseum.
I was describing baby gay to my mom and she whispered, please stop talking.
If you really enjoyed the show, leaving a review on Apple Podcasts helps more people find the show. But also just share it with your friends or like retweet our little promos and stuff. That helps us out. Or if you really like the show, patrons, I swear, we're working on our next show and tell. We mostly put up an episode over there that's just for patrons. We try to put up one once a month. We mostly put up one once a month, but hopefully we could make that more. And we also have a Ko-fi that's ko-fi, and we're Authors Note Pod on both of those platforms. You can find all the information about finding us across social media or getting in touch with us on our website. That's authorsnotepod.com. My name is Cass. And if you want to deal with my particular brand of monster fuckery, you can find me everywhere across the internet at Valhethella. That's VALHETHELLA. Tease, where can people get you at?
You can find me online at Vicuña. That's VICUNAD. You could find me on the Fresh Podcast Market, a real podcast about fake podcasts. You can also find me on Fandom Spotlight, where I write bad manga reviews. If you liked our theme music, that was by James Wayulo, and you could find him on Bandcamp under James Y. And Cass, who did our cover art?
Our cover art was done by the wonderful and incredible Nyaliest. You can find her on Twitter at Nyaliest. It's NYALLIEST. Tish, you thought you fucking got out of it. You got out of it last week, but this week, Tease.
Yeah.
What is something that does not have a fandom that you wish had a fandom?
Bucket hats.
That's good. You can fit so many eggs in a bucket hat.
Bro, you don't think I got that thing on me at all times?
You can fit so many eggs in that.
I know. That's like a whole basket to fit your eggs in.
Until next time, practice safe sex, practice safe, sane, and consensual sex if you're interested. If you're not, then just like chill out and play some Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
People who have sex can't play Animal Crossing. This is a new rule.
Bad news,
Bye.
sex havers. Bye.